Several days ago, Possibility Maven said something that I cannot stop thinking about. By the way, you know that a creator is really powerful and their work is really important if they mention something and it just really sticks with you. It is right there, stuck in your brain, and you keep mulling it over and mulling it over. That is how I feel about so much of Possibility Maven's content. It's so powerful and really gets me to think in a different way, in a deeper way about all kinds of issues. So they said something the other day about how the way people are really acting out at each other online right now or in real life, just the way that folks are really dysregulated and really struggling, that has a lot to do with the fact that we don't take time to grieve. The pace at which we are all being traumatized right now, the way that we are experiencing the loss of the life we should have had, the way that every day something new is being taken away from us, and yet we don't have time to grieve. We haven't even really had time to grieve from the election, the opportunity cost there, the way that we were deprived of a future with Kamala Harris as president, right? And then on top of that, the grief of having an authoritarian takeover of the United States. People losing their ability to go to medical school, grad school, people losing their jobs, people losing their health care, people struggling in real tremendous ways. None of us have had the time to grieve any of that because I think a couple of reasons, but number one is because there's just a new layer every day, right? We're just being bombarded, and that is an intentional effort. That is what the Trump regime is doing to us on purpose, right? Steve Bannon calls it flood the zone. It is that tsunami that is meant to inundate you and drown you. And so you don't stand up and fight because you are just completely swept away by all of the terrible things that they are doing. And second, and I think Possibility Maven touched on this, is like we're not very good at grieving in this culture. We're not very good, especially publicly grieving, and we definitely aren't good at giving ourselves the time to go through those steps. Right. My mom died in 2020, and I feel like in 2025, I'm still grieving her. I know folks say that you never get over the loss of your mother, that is a grief that you will be processing forever, whether or not you had a great relationship with her. But I think my point here is that processing grief takes so much longer than we allow ourselves. Our culture doesn't give people time off to grieve. I think about bereavement days. My husband gets like 2 bereavement days, 2 days. And then you're expected to just be right back at it at work after your dad dies or your mother-in-law dies or your grandma dies or your spouse or your child dies. No, got to get back to it. Got to get back to that capitalist machine. We need you back in the office. You're expected to be over it. I think about like Victorian England, and women had to wear mourning dresses for like a year, and you had to have your mourning black band on your arm so that people knew you were grieving. It was a public display of this process that you were going through. And like, this person is not expected to behave in a normal, rational way. This person is really going through it. And it is something that the whole community can see visually on your body, right, through your clothing, that you are going through this process. But in the United States, so much of our grief is invisible. And I was really thinking about this past weekend because my eldest daughter is a fish and wildlife major, and I've talked about that before, but she's actually taking courses on the coast this summer. And I was walking through the EPA area, right, where all of the EPA offices and NOAA offices are, where she's studying. And it looks like a ghost town, y'all. It's just shuttered. The funding has been cut off. So many of the EPA folks have been fired. Their programs have been completely dismantled. And as somebody who, I was a biology major, science is really important to me. Okay, I'm trying not to get really upset in this video. Environmentalism is really important to me. Conservation, climate change mitigation, all of that science, that really, really worthy science that our tax dollars fund, that's so necessary in ways that I think has been villainized so much by folks on the right and misunderstood by folks who aren't doing that kind of research. People don't really understand the necessity of that work until it's no longer there. And as I was walking through this area and seeing all of these empty buildings and all of these workers that are no longer there, all of this important science that's no longer being done, all of this environmental protection that's no longer being done, I just felt this overwhelming sense of grief, right? Of like, this is not a path that our society should be on. This is something that is hurting us now. It's hurting our children. It's hurting the planet. Just this huge sense of grief. And I was immediately drawn back to Possibility Maven's video about how we don't take time to grieve. that the defense of democracy now is just such a rapid pace. Like, I rarely allow myself to feel any of the grief that is necessary to feel. I think it's necessary to give ourselves that time, or we're going to burn out, we're going to implode, we're going to lash out at other people. But also, like, we have to keep fighting so much that we don't get that downtime. We don't get 6 months to grieve. We don't get days. We often don't get hours. It's just like, okay, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. And I don't really have an answer here, but I was thinking about possibility Maven saying how important, like, this is who we are as people, as human beings. We are made, we need to go through the grieving process. What does that look like right now? Like, what do y'all think that looks like right now? When we cannot let our guard down for a second. I feel like I have to be hyper vigilant. I feel like I have to be on top of everything that's happening. I have to be fully functional. I cannot have a down day where I'm like laying in bed in the fetal position, crying over the fact that like everybody from the EPA has been fired, and like just incredibly important scientific work has been stopped so that billionaires can like fuck us all a little bit harder. I don't have time to stop and grieve the fact that like so much has been taken from us, but also I understand that it's necessary to take that time. So what do you think that looks like? What do you think it looks like to take that time to grieve right now so that it doesn't result in us acting in destructive ways that harm community and harm our resistance efforts? So it doesn't result in us completely shutting down and falling into despair. I don't necessarily have an answer, but I realized walking through South Beach that I had not given myself permission to experience grief like at all until that moment when I saw all those empty buildings that should have been full of researchers, that should have been full of really good work. That's just completely gone. That's completely obliterated from our society. All those lives of those researchers are impacted, but like millions of lives are impacted, and countless ecosystems by that work that is no longer being done. And I just felt this huge sense of how pointless it was. Like that doesn't need to be happening. None of this needs to be happening. I think that adds a compounding level to any grief that we feel, is like the senselessness of what's being done. It's so unnecessary, right? It's not like we're experiencing the aftermath of a natural disaster and that kind of grief of like, oh, my home got swept away in a flood, or, a tornado ripped through my town. And that kind of grief of like, there's nothing we could do on some level to prevent natural disasters. This was all entirely preventable. It's so senseless. It's so needless. All of this is happening for no reason other than for cruel, terrible, rich people to add more money on their giant pile that they already have, right? We're all suffering so needlessly. And so, I don't know, I would love to know what you think about what a healthy way is to process grief right now, and what it means to take the time to do that in the context of all of the work that we have to get done. Because I think Possibility Maven is absolutely right. It will come out in destructive ways if we are not taking the time to do that. But how do we find that time right now? How is that even possible for us to accomplish any sort of grieving process without being completely overwhelmed and shut down, without letting the fascists get ahead of us? Yeah, I would really love to know your thoughts.